Hello. I'm so glad to see you guys today. This is not only for Miss Carolina's class, but for Miss Penta's class too. So I wanted to say hello, especially to you guys. I miss you all as well. Well, before we get started today, I did have a quick question for you. So I'm wondering, looks good, doesn't it? Yes, here's my snack. Would you rather have this whole candy bar? Now, you know how much I love my chocolate. Would you rather have this whole candy bar or half of the one that's on the desk? Would you rather have this whole candy bar or half of the one that's on my desk? Now, I'm sure you said, I would much rather have that whole candy bar. And if you were thinking about my two options, whole candy bar or the half one on my desk, then you started to think like a mathematician and you started to think about the words whole and half. Those are fractions. And so we're going to spend the next couple of weeks talking about fractions and how to talk about the parts of a whole and how do we do that using mathematician's language. Now, as I stated, many of you probably said that you'd like to have this whole candy bar instead of half of the one on my desk. But would you be disappointed if I showed you the one on my desk? Now, would you rather have this whole candy bar or would you rather have half of this one? I'm sure you've probably changed your mind. As we continue to talk about fractions, we're going to talk about what is the whole, and if we divide it into equal parts, what are the names of those parts? And that's what you're going to be learning how to do. Not only name a fraction, but write a fraction and represent a fraction with drawings in your notebook. So before we get started, will you please grab your notebook and a pencil, click on pause so that you can step away and do that, and then when you come back, click on the play button to begin the lesson. All right, open up your notebook to the first blank page, get your pencil ready, and then put it down off to the side because we won't be using it for the first couple minutes. So I want to talk to you about what is a fraction. Well, a fraction is parts of a whole, and those parts have a name. And mathematicians have also said that when we're looking at fractions, the parts must be equal. And we've seen that word a lot this year, equal. So let's take a look at some shapes and see if they have been divided into equal parts. Let's take a look at this example. Okay, let's take a look at these three shapes. This first shape, it has been divided into three parts, but are they equal? Are they the same shape and size? No, they're not. You can see that this shape, this part, is different than the middle part. Let's take a look at the second one. The second one's kind of tricky. And if you look really carefully right here, you'll see that this is shaped a little bit differently. That our line that divides these two parts is not completely in the middle. This shape's a little smaller than this one. Let's take a look at the last one. Is this one in three equal parts? Does each one of these pieces of this square look exactly the same shape and size? It is. And this is a great representation of a fraction. Here we have one whole square that's been divided up into three equal pieces. 1, 2, 3. When we divide a shape into three equal pieces, each one of these has a name. It's called a third. Here's a 1/3, here's a third, and here's a third. All right, let's try one more. All right, here's our next example. Let's look at these three shapes or three examples. Which one of these three can you see have been divided into equal parts? Now remember, equal parts means that each part is the same shape and the same size. Is it the first one, the second one, or the third one? Well, if you've noticed that it's the first one, you're exactly right. I see that this square has been divided right down the middle this way and right down the middle horizontally. By doing that, I've turned this square into 4 equal pieces. When you divide a shape into 4 equal pieces, we call them fourths. This is 1/4, this is 1/4, this is 1/4, and this is 1/4. How many fourths does this whole have? 4. So now let's take a look at the equal parts of a shape and what are their names. This whole rectangle can be divided up into equal parts. Now, equal parts are exactly the same size. Take a look at the rectangle on my paper, on the screen, I mean. I'm going to click on this rectangle, and when I do, I will divide it into 2 equal parts. Here's a part and here's a part. And notice those parts are the same shape and same size. When you divide something into 2 equal parts, those parts are called halves. Here's 1/2 and here's the other half. I bet you can think of a time when you've shared something with a friend and you made sure that you split it completely in half so that each one of you had fair and equal pieces. Now, when you put 1/2 and 1/2 together, those are called halves. Has that V sound in the middle. Let's take a look at another example. Here's the same rectangle, but we're going to divide the rectangle a little differently. Now I am going to divide my rectangle into 3 equal parts. Can you think of the word that we would use when talking about fractions of 3 parts? Thirds. And here we have 3/3. Here's 1/3, here's 1/3, and here's 1/3. Now it is important to look at the whole piece and to count how many parts did it take to make my whole. 1, 2, 3. And since these parts are each equally, are exactly the same size, then they are named thirds. Let's take a look at one more example. And this time we're going to use the same rectangle again, because we can take a whole and divide it into equal parts many different ways. Now we're going to take a rectangle, but this time we're going to divide it into 4 equal parts. And those are called fourths. This is 1/4, this is a fourth, this is a fourth, and this is a fourth. And when you have one whole and you have divided it into 4 equal parts, these are called fourths. All right, boys and girls, it's time to get out your notebook and open up to the first blank page. And at the top, we're going to draw a rectangle. Now, save some room because I think we're going to probably draw about 3 or 4 rectangles on this piece of paper. So don't make it too big, but I do want you to make it big enough so you can write inside of it. Draw a rectangle like the one that I have on my screen. And this time, we are going to divide the rectangle into 2 equal parts. Draw your rectangle. And once you have your rectangle, draw a line exactly down the middle so that you have divided your rectangle into equal parts. Here's one part and here's the second part. But we're actually going to put the name of this fraction. You see, mathematicians have given all fraction pieces a name. This piece is called 1/2. Please label 1/2 of your rectangle and give him his name. Now on this half of my rectangle, it's also got the same name, 1/2. Remember, these two pieces are divided equally, same exact size. And when you have an item that's been divided into this, or a whole that's been divided into two equal parts, those are called halves. Here's 1/2 and here's 1/2. How many halves does it take to make a whole? It takes 2. All right. Pause and make sure that you have labeled your rectangle with 1/2 and 1/2. We're not going to we don't have to put these numbers inside, but pause so that your rectangle on your paper looks like mine. Don't forget to label the inside to tell me the name of each part. Pause. All right, boys and girls, let's write or draw another rectangle on your notebook page. Now this time, we're going to take our rectangle and we're going to divide it a little differently. We're going to divide this into 3 equal parts, and this can be a little tricky. So I want you to watch me first. I am going to get out my pen and I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm trying to just trying to be careful to make sure that my rectangle, that each side is exactly each side is exactly the same size, and that each end is exactly the same size. Here's my rectangle. Now, we're not going to divide it right into the middle. We're going to divide it into 3 different parts. Now, boys and girls, I know that this is difficult. Even mine is not divided perfectly into 3 equal parts. But drawing's kind of difficult. And then if you and I were together, or you with your teacher, we would hand you shapes that were already divided into 3 equal parts. And so it's okay if your drawing is not perfect. We know that we intend that we want this to be 3 equal parts. So it's okay if your drawing is not exactly perfect. We'll pretend like it is, okay? Just like mine, please. So inside of this, I'm going to name each one of these pieces. What is its name? Well, let's look at this whole rectangle. How many parts are there? 1, 2, 3. And if it has 3 parts, then each one of these are called thirds. So this is one of my thirds. So his name is 1/3. Here's another third, so he also gets the name 1/3. And here's the last third. He also gets the name 1/3. How many thirds did it take to make this whole rectangle? It took 3. 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. All right, let's try one more example. On your paper, please draw another rectangle. And I'm going to do my best to make my rectangle a perfect rectangle, but it's okay if it's not. We know that our intentions are to have a perfect rectangle. But this time, we're going to divide our rectangle into 4 equal parts. And in order to divide it into 4 equal parts, I'm going to come right in the middle and divide this in half. But I'm going to come over here and divide it. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 equal parts. These are called fourths. This is one of my fourths. And to name one of my fourths, I am going to write its name on it. That is 1/4. 1/4. How many fourths does it take to make a whole? It takes 4. All right, boys and girls, inside of your notebook, you probably now have 3 rectangles. And you've divided your rectangles into equal parts. The first one you divided into halves, and you've named each part. The second rectangle you divided into thirds, and you named each part. And this last one, we've divided a rectangle into 4 equal parts, and we've named them fourths. Good job. Today you've talked about and you've practiced with me how to take a whole shape, divide it into equal parts, and give it a name. Remember, it's really important when we do that to count the parts. That's how we figure out what its name is. How many parts does it have? If it has 2 parts, they're named halves. 3 parts, what are their names? Thirds. 4 parts, what are their names? Fourths. So here's my challenge. Don't get in trouble for playing with your food. But let's say you have some mashed potatoes on your plate. Could you divide them in half? 2 parts? Maybe you have a green bean on your plate. Could you divide it into thirds? 3 equal parts? Try it out and notice fractions of objects or objects that are around your house that are divided into equal parts. We'll talk more about fractions in our next video. Good job, everyone.